Good evening to everyone tuning in to Automotive Inspire, our new series where we interview innovative, inspiring people who are changing the world of mobility and who have great stories to tell. I'm Drew Winter with the Informa Automotive Group, and I'm here today with Richard Vaughan, Director of Crafted Quality at electric truck maker Rivian, and he's got some great stories. Richard led the design team for the first full-size luxury SUV ever, the Lincoln Navigator, and he's held a number of high-level posts at major suppliers. But to me, one of the most amazing things Richard has done is he's managed to merge his expertise and passion for European luxury cars into his professional career. Turning your passion into a job is everybody's dream, but it's an impossible dream for most of us. Richard has done it. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but he did it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Richard, which came first, your interest in design or your interest in British luxury cars?
It's a great question, Drew. I think my interest in cars in general came first. I can't think of a time when I wasn't totally excited about cars. And I think the earliest pictures of me in diapers with a pacifier are standing in the seat of my father's 1968 Camaro, holding the steering wheel, pretending to drive. It's always, that whole car thing's always been there. Design came later, cars came first.
So how old were you when you first started sketching, and what did you sketch?
I think, as far as I can remember, I was about 5 years old. I started drawing cars, of course, side views, because that's all I could draw. I was very fortunate in that I had an aunt that I spent a lot of time with in the summers who was a music teacher. And she very quickly figured out I had no musical skills of any kind, no ability. But she recognized, well, she knew the importance of the arts, and she recognized that I liked to draw. And so she made sure that I always had a ream of paper and some crayons and pencils. Always, which it's a small thing, but when you're a little kid, if you're 5 and you want to draw, but there's no paper, well, you just go do something else. But she made sure I always had a way to draw. And I think that little step, went a long way towards, letting me pursue drawing and art.
Wow. Wow. So when did you first learn about McKinley Thompson Jr., Ford's first African-American designer, and what kind of impact did that have on you?
Yeah, that's it's interesting. I don't remember if somebody handed me this or if I found it myself. But in the January 1984 issue of Ebony magazine, which was a magazine aimed at the African-American community, there was an article about black car designers, which sadly was still new and different in 1984. In some ways, it's still new and different today. But
yeah,
there was an article in the magazine about black car designers in Detroit, and it featured McKinley Thompson, who was the first black car designer who went to work for Ford in, I think, 1957. But it also featured Sam Mayers, who became a mentor for me later. Sam was well known for designing the Fox body Mustang that people loved from the 80s. And it featured Ed Welburn and Emmeline King. And when you're young, I was 14 when this article came out. Like, you don't know the things you can't do and you're not supposed to do. So I thought, well, I'm going to write all these people letters. Now I think about it, I don't even know how it happened. I got these people's addresses somehow before the internet, and I wrote them all letters with enclosing my sketches. And much to my great surprise, I got responses back from Ed Welburn and Sam Mayers. Now, Ed Welburn was a manager of the Oldsmobile studio at General Motors. And we started a correspondence relationship, and I would send him my sketches and he would crit them, and then he would send them back to me. And then I think after about a year of that, he and Sam invited me to come to Detroit and tour the design studios and learn about careers in design. And fortunately, my father indulged me and flew me to Detroit, where I found out I had relatives that I had never met, which was fun, right? But, it's the kindness of strangers. And I think about that now. Ed became the vice president of design, global design for GM. He became a hugely important person. Obviously, he was going places. He took the time to communicate with a kid he had never met.
Wow.
And it had a big influence. So here I am.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think I've interviewed it a few times, and I think he actually started out kind of the same way as I recall. He was sending his sketches to General Motors, and they had somehow he got somebody to read them, and then the design department. And I think I think it was some mentoring there too. But I mean, that's really cool. Really
when
cool.
I think about it now as an older person, I think, wow, these guys invited me and they took me on a tour.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
You know how hard it is to get into a design studio? If you don't work there? Yeah, it was incredible. Lunch in the executive dining room and all of that. Yeah, there have been a lot, and it almost feels as if I'm cheating people if I don't mention them all. But you have, you think of a few. Some people who are in the industry may know Julie Freeman. She's the president of the Original Equipment Supplier Association. I worked for her for years at Visteon Corporation. I learned a lot from Julie about managing people and how to treat people like people. And that's half of the task of being in a leadership role is understanding people and how to motivate people and how to not get in their way, how to open doors for them and teach them how to be successful. So she was a big influence there. I had a director named Tim Yearden, who he works at Ford. He's a director at Ford today. I learned from Tim how to manage surviving the corporate world. And you can't overstate the importance of learning to have emotional maturity in business situations, learning how to talk to people above you, learning how to survive the things that are thrown at you and all the different things that happen in the corporate world, layoffs and moving the business around the world and travel and all of that kind of stuff. So there've been a few people, but there've been lots of people along the way, and you learn a little bit from each of them. Of course, there's always the great designers that everybody knows about, all the names, Giugiaro and that kind of thing. But it's just as important to learn from the people around you, I think.
So were there many Black people at any of the places you've worked, and what kind of challenges did you face as a person of color working in places where, we know there hasn't been a whole lot of diversity?
Yeah, it's really sad. There almost have never been any. And that continues to be true, virtually everywhere anybody can work today. And it presents a lot of challenges. It always has. It probably always will, at least in my professional lifetime. For me, getting through that required a level of patience with people, and a level of perseverance, and the ability to step back, zoom out, and not be personally invested in some of those situations. You have to see them for what they are, which is a societal level or institutional level situation, and it's not always directed at me personally or whoever the person might be, but patience and tolerance for sometimes people's stupidity, frankly.
So what advice would you give to young designers, especially young Black designers, about pursuing careers in automotive design and some of the, I guess you might have to, whatever you would call it, the wiseness or whatever? How do you talk to them, or what should they know?
You know, take advantage, I would say to any kid, you know, take advantage of your youth. You know, when you're young, people will open doors for you that are definitely closed to you as an older person. You know, when I was 14 and I could write a letter to Ed Welburn and he would look at my stuff and he'd say, hey, come and visit, you know, GM and I'll show you around. You know, you don't get to do that when you're 24 or 34, right? Nobody wants to answer that letter. So if you're young, you know, ask, tell people what you're interested in, and then show up and do what you say you're going to do. That's half the battle. And particularly for people in the arts, a lot of artists are very free-spirited, and designers are people who don't like to play by the rules. But if you want to survive in the business world and understand the business of design, you have to play by those rules. And a lot of times it's just doing what you said you were going to do. And there's a lot of value in that. People underestimate how, particularly in the arts and design, a lot of young designers underestimate how badly people need their skills and are not used to having people who have artistic skills actually perform the work that they promised that they were going to do.
Wow. Okay, let's move to another topic. Lots of people in the car industry collect cars, but, you know, from Detroit, that's usually, you know, Mustangs and Chevys. They aren't Rolls Royces, Bentleys, and Aston Martins. So, you know, how did you get started on this?
You know, this is funny. My earliest recollection of seeing a Rolls Royce was when my parents had a Chevy Vega that had a blown motor. And of course, people will know about the Chevy Vega and the blown motors.
And I remember, away right there.
Yeah. So we had to go to the Chevrolet dealership in Richmond, Virginia, which happened to also be a Rolls Royce dealership. I think I was 4 or 5. And I remember walking into the showroom with my dad and seeing a Rolls Royce Silver Shadow with a velvet rope around it while they were working on our, you know, crappy Vega. And to me, it was just like I had seen something from another planet. It was the best thing I had ever seen. And I was instantly attracted to those kinds of cars. But I can have a conversation with anybody about any kind of car. If you want to talk about Chevettes, we can go there. You know,
okay.
Anything. You know, I can talk about cars. But yeah, for me, I instantly was drawn to British cars and French cars as well, because they were expressive. You know, though the cars that I'm interested in from a hobby point of view are cars that are very representative of the culture in which they were created. You know, if you look at a British car from the 60s, you very clearly can see it's British. And, you know, it's very majestic, some would say pompous. A French car from that era is going to be very whimsical and reflective of French, you know, society. And then, you know, a German car from that area is very serious and engineering oriented. And that's what I love. I love that era of automobiles where design was representative of the culture in which it was created.
Wow. Okay. Well, so we got a couple pictures of some of your cars. I think we can maybe throw them up. Tell us a little bit about, yeah, and I think this is a perfect example of what you talk about, representing a time and everything. The Aston Martin Lagonda. This
is my 1984 Aston Martin Lagonda, which this car came out in 1975 as a 1976 model. And it was the most futuristic car in the world at that time. I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like this. I mean, if you think about like what a 1975 Cadillac DeVille looked like, or even lesser cars, and then the fashions of that era, which were bell-bottom pants and platform shoes. This car was linear and pure, and it was the expression of just one person. So today's cars are all designed by committees and teams and groups. This car was designed by William Towns. He was the only person who worked on it, and the company only had 5 engineers. So it's a very interesting car, and it's one of the very few cars in the world that is a complete expression of one person. And that's one of the reasons I love it.
Wow. So tell us about the next one.
Yeah. 1957 Bentley S1. So this is, we call it the S1. It was called the S-Series when it was new. I like this car because, as I said before, it represents that era of British design when you looked at this car and you knew it was British. If you looked at a Cadillac from 1957 with its fins and, you know, sort of aircraft styling, I mean, that was very American. This car could only have come from England. And the man who designed this car, he was extremely influential. His name was John Blatchley. He designed the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, this Bentley, the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. And these were cars that were very influential in the world of design. He doesn't get a lot of credit, but I think when most people think about a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, this is the shape they think of. You know, you've seen, you know, William and Mortimer Duke on Trading Places, cruising down the road in their Rolls Royce on the way to, you know, to fire Eddie Murphy. You know, this is the car that people think of, and it belonged to a friend of mine who had owned it for 45 years, and it helps me when I drive it. It helps me think about him and all the fun times we had going to car shows in it. So I'm trying to keep it in as good shape as I can. Wow,
it's cool. Okay, and so then we're going to move up a decade now with your next car. Yeah.
I love this car. This is a 1967 Bentley T-Series. And this was, from a design point of view, interesting because Rolls-Royce had to move in, which, you know, Rolls and Bentley were the same company then. Rolls-Royce had to move into modernity. So they had to step away from that look that we just talked about, which was a traditionally styled body-on-frame vehicle, and they had to move into a monocoque design, which is, you know, where the body and the chassis are just one unit, and they had to become a modern car. And I think these cars were very successful. I think they sold about 30,000 of them, which was a lot for a Rolls-Royce. And from a design point of view, it was incredibly successful because it still looked like a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, yet it looked entirely modern for its time, and it could be driven by its owner. It didn't require a driver or a chauffeur. So they were able to bridge a lot of different worlds, you know, people from the old moneyed world, people from business who just wanted a nice car. For me, it was sort of the sweet spot for that kind of thinking.
So Bentley, as I recall, for a long time was sort of their, sportier car aimed at a younger demographic and all that.
Yeah, I think the ad said Bentley for the man who feels diffident about being seen in a Rolls Royce. I mean, I think, you know, some of this, some of what you're saying is true. I think in this era, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was really for somebody who wanted to own one of these cars, but who just didn't have the ability to be seen driving something as ostentatious as a Rolls Royce. So a Bentley was a car, you know, people would say, well, what kind of car is that? You could say, oh, see the B, it's a Buick. You know, people were disarmed by it. They didn't quite know what it was. And, you know, you could show up at the factory and people didn't look at you sideways. But as you can see, it's very subtle. That's a joke.
Yeah, I don't know, but this, yeah, I forgot to mention, you know, you've written 6 books, or give us a, you know, just a quick review of the books you've written.
I've written some books about the cars I love. I wrote Aston Martin Lagonda, Yesterday's Tomorrow Today, because it needed to be written. Because when I went to buy my car and I wanted to find a book, there wasn't one, so now there is one. I actually printed in that book the status of all 645 of those cars that were made, where they are today, what happened to them if they don't exist anymore, with a picture. It's a little tedious, but it's interesting. There was a book review that came out in one of the prestigious British car magazines, and it said it was. I think it said it was horrifying and amazing at the same time, you know, which was pretty funny. You know, you write these books because you have something to say. You know, I wrote the book on Rolls-Royce and Bentley in the 80s and 90s because I thought it was important to document that period of history for those cars. They appeal to a group of people who are much like myself. So I tell people, hey, it's a book by an enthusiast for an enthusiast. It's probably something that is a little nerdy, but fun.
But people can get these on Amazon or whatever. No.
Anywhere fine books are sold. Yes. Yeah, mostly people buy them mostly on Amazon. It depends on what country they're in. And some markets, they're not available on hardcover, and some markets they're available softcover and hardcover. But they've been fun. That's a labor of love. You know, I can sit down and write. I can talk about cars forever. I can sit down and write about cars, you know, all evening and amuse myself. And yeah, hopefully some people will get some enjoyment out of them.
Yeah. So what are your proudest achievements so far? I mean, both in your career and as a collector.
You know, from a career point of view, I've been really fortunate in that quite not by my choice, because I think when I started off, I thought, well, it's going to be design forever. And then, you know, through the spinoff of Visteon, you know, I got swept up in that, and I ended up in a different side of the business. So for me, it's been awesome to have been part of every aspect of the creation of a car. I mean, I've worked in the design studio as a designer. I've done exteriors. I've done interiors. I've designed electronics, user interfaces, you know, screen graphics. Then I got into perceived quality and craftsmanship, and you know, I'm leading that effort now, where I'm working today at Rivian. And you'd be hard pressed to think of a part of the vehicle that consumers can see, feel, or touch that I haven't had an opportunity to work on. So for me, that's, you know, I'll be able to go out and retire one of these days feeling like I accomplished what I wanted to do, which was to just be involved in the car business. From a personal point of view, you know, it's funny. The thing that I really am pleased about is that, because the little kid, and I'm still a little kid inside, is that I have bought the real version of every one of my Matchbox cars that I loved. Like all my favorite Matchbox cars, which I still have, there's also a real one, full-size one, sitting in my garage now. So it's very nerdy. It's also, you know, really important for me.
Oh, man, that's cool. Well, nerds are big now, you know.
Yeah, nerds rule the world.
So, and also we talked earlier, a really important thing I just want to mention, you talk about the importance of the business of design too, because having worked at a number of suppliers and stuff, you know, you can talk about finishes and things or textures or all these different things about way things should be, but unless you have to be able to explain it to a supplier or you have to understand the costs involved and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. You also have to be able to, all those things are true, but you also have to be able to speak the languages of the people you're working with. A lot of designers are not successful because they can never communicate effectively with people who don't understand the language of design. You know, they're trying to talk to engineers in a way that the engineers don't understand, and frustrations build. The designers often don't understand the financial side of the business as well, and they feel boxed in because they feel like, oh, you know, let's call them the bean counters are after me. They're trying to get me to reduce the cost. You know, part of being a successful designer is designing and executing within the targets you're given. So whether that means, you know, you're designing a vehicle that's at a certain height and you've got to package people in it, or if it means you're designing a vehicle to a certain cost and you have to create a fender that can be stamped with only, you know, 2 presses of the machine. These are all things that mean that you're going to be successful. It's more than just drawing pictures of cars for people who are in design school now. you know, to have a long career and to be respected by your peers and to actually achieve your design goals, to see the things that you design make it into production, you have to be able to sort of navigate all of those waters. And the business of design it's more than just design. It is the things I just mentioned. It's communication. It's talking to people and understanding things that are not your expertise, but trying to get on the same page with other people.
Okay, we're down to our last few minutes. Last question. Finish this sentence. I love working in the automotive/mobility industry because
it's my only choice. I have no. I'm such a car person through and through. I can't even imagine doing something else. For me, it was the only option. And if it hadn't been working directly in the creation side of the business within the industry, I would have owned a car dealership. It would have been something else.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I think we're, well, Richard, thank you so much. We're just about out of time.
Thank you, Drew. It's been great.
It's been great. And so really, it really has been great. Really enjoyed this. Yeah. So I'd like to thank our audience too, who joined us today live from all over the world. This interview will restream at 2 p.m. Eastern time on LinkedIn, wardsauto.com and tuauto.com, where you can also watch it on demand. Be sure to come back May 20th when I will be interviewing Melissa Sufkin, the inspiring cultural anthropologist at Waymo, who is making autonomous vehicles friendlier. And please mark your calendars for November 15th through 19th, because that will be Informa's huge new in-person Automotive Tech Week event with 150 speakers, thousands of attendees at the Suburban Collection Showplace in Novi, Michigan, USA. So you got to be there. So thanks again, Richard Vaughan, and thanks again, everyone, for attending, and we will see you next month.
Thanks.